The Pacific Aviation Museum is a place where you can actually experience history and the technology of flight. It's really a trip back in time.
Ford Island was the first airfield in the islands. It was established in 1916, was open for business in late 1917-18. The Army shared one half of the island, the Navy was the other half, but all the early aviation activities in the islands basically took place right here on Ford Island and in Pearl Harbor. The Aviation Museum is one of 5 Pearl Harbor memorials or museum sites to visit, along with the Arizona Memorial, Pacific Historic Parks, Valor in the Pacific, the Utah Memorial, the Bowfin Museum, which is Pacific Submarine Museum, and the USS Missouri. If you want to visit it, the way to do it is to go to the Arizona Memorial Visitor Center, lock your car, check your bags, because you're not allowed to bring, big bags onto a military facility for obvious reasons, and take the free shuttle bus out here. We have 2 hangars right now. Hangar 37 is the entrance area and where we basically cover the Pearl Harbor attack and the first 6 months afterwards. And we have lots of stuff from the Pearl Harbor attack here. But over in Hangar 79, which is 3 times bigger than this hangar, we store aircraft and we restore them. And the restoration shop is at the back of the hangar. So you can actually see airplanes in the process of being restored. And sometimes they'll let you hold a wrench or drive a rivet or something like that. Eventually we're going to get Hangar 54, which is the next one in line, and that's where the modern aircraft will be stored. Well, I grew up in the Air Force. My dad was an Air Force colonel and flew in World War II and continued right up until the time he retired. We were stationed at Hickam, and so I was always interested in aviation. I became a newspaper man and was a newspaper man for 35 years, but I always kept up with aviation history. And in the early 1980s, an aviation museum was born here called the Pacific Aerospace Museum, and it was at the airport. And I volunteered there, and pretty soon I became both the historian and the curator there, and I worked there part-time at nights and weekends in addition to my regular job for about 12 years. And then it got shut down. The day after 9/11, it shut down. At that time, they were already planning a museum out here on Ford Island, and because where they have actual hangars, we didn't have space for real airplanes at the airport. And so I became a volunteer here. After a while, the director decided to recruit me. One of my primary responsibilities here at the museum is interpretation, and that's planning how things are going to be presented, and in a way that gets the message across in the easiest way possible. Now, we had a B-17 Flying Fortress coming in. It's probably the most famous airplane of World War II. It's a plane that a lot of people really love, and so we wanted to do it right. We knew this plane had been pulled out of a swamp in New Guinea, and it was not in very good shape. So what do you do with it? Do you restore it completely? Do you keep it as a relic? Do you do something in between? What do you do? So anyway, I built this planning model right here. And this is an example of using models as planning tools. This is not a model that'll ever be on display in the museum, but it is something we can use to start thinking about how best to do things. And the ironic thing about the model kit is that it's a Revell model from the early 1960s, and I believe it is one of the first models I built as a kid. And to get back to it 50 years later is pretty interesting. But another way of interpreting things is through original art. And this painting right here is a painting of the airplane we call Swamp Ghost on her last mission. And I commissioned it with an artist named Russ Smith, who's a really well-known aviation artist. And he and I worked on the composition and make the details as accurate as possible. For the first time, you're able to see what her last mission was like. She's being harassed by up to 9 different Zeros and Claude fighters. And she's flying through thunderstorms, trying to get away from Rabaul, and she's shot full of holes. There's something like 75 bullet holes in Swamp Ghost right now. And as historians and as curators, as people who are telling a story, we're not getting rid of those bullet holes. They are part of her skin. This is the only B-17 in the world that still has the original battle damage. As part of my job as curator, we take track of all the little things and all the big things here at the museum. And one of the biggest is this C-47. It's called a Dakota. It is probably the most famous airplane of all time, and we got to take good care of it. This one we discovered served in the Philippines and in New Guinea during World War II, and we're taking her back to where she was in 1944 with authentic markings. But we have to strip the paint, we have to make it all stable, and the whole point is this plane is already 70-some years old, but we want it to still be around 170 years from now. The guys who handle the wrenches and the scraping and the painting, they're restoration experts, and we have some real experts here at the museum. Jim and Chris and all the other guys, and the volunteers who come in are guys who've all dealt with aircraft or metal their whole life. And there's something about aviation that just draws in a certain kind of personality. Like they say, you can always tell a pilot, but you can't tell them much. And so we have some real personalities working here. And these guys learn the story of Pearl Harbor, they learn the story of aviation, and they add their own 2 cents to it, and they will take you on a tour that's just incredible, and you'll remember it your whole life. And that's one of the great things about working here. These volunteers are what make the place run. I mean, they're the lifeblood of the organization. When we tell time here at the museum, it's really not in terms of days or hours or minutes, it's in terms of dollars. And for example, people say, how long will that take? And I say, well, that'll be done in $1.5 million. That's how long it takes. It's all a matter of manpower, it's a matter of materials, it's a matter of resources. But our goal is to restore or repaint up to 4 aircraft a year. Well, this is an F-4 Phantom, and I'm very, very fond of this particular bird because I spent about 6 hours of flight time in the rear seat of this bird when she served with the Hawaii Air National Guard. And the interesting thing is, this airplane, when it was with the Hawaii Guard, had a bird name. Its name was Pu'eo, which is Hawaiian for owl. And we have owls living in the hangar here, and we're known as the hangar owls, the guys who work on the airplanes. And so the Hawaiian owl is now our amakua for the museum. We've got big things here at the museum. Now, usually in a museum you've got these dainty artifacts you got to display. We've got airplanes that weigh tons and they're made out of metal, and airplanes are just air held together with rivets. So you got to worry about them deforming while they're sitting on the ground. You got to preserve them. But we've also got lots of small things too. We've got flight jackets and pins and books, and we're at a historic site. We're here where the first airfield in Hawaii was built. This is the cradle of aviation for the islands. And imagine Hawaii today without aviation. And beyond that, aviation changed the way we view the world. And to preserve these things, we need a clean, safe, light-safe environment to keep them. And so we're in the middle of building an archive and library in our original operations building, and we're also fundraising for that now, and it's not going to take a couple of dollars, it's going to take a couple of million. The easiest way to make a donation is to go to our website, pacificaviationmuseum.org, and you can become a member. That's a real good way of making a donation right there, but also you become part of the museum family. We have a fair number of events, we've got more coming up. We show films at the end of the month. We have special events. Today, for example, we're celebrating Amelia Earhart's birthday. And that's just a sort of special thing you might walk into and not realize that it's happening. But Amelia Earhart is tied into Ford Island because the first time she tried to fly around the world, she crashed right out here and had to try again, and then she disappeared on that flight. So we're an integral part of Hawaii's aviation history, and donations always help. And like I said, pacificaviationmuseum.org, go there, or you can contact our development directors, Alyssa Lyons or Carol Green.